When Elvis's twin brother, Jesse Garon, was stillborn, it might have been because Gladys' parents were closely related. When parents are related, the chances of passing on unhealthy genes to their children increase. This happened in Queen Victoria's family too. She married her first cousin, Prince Albert, and they had children with a defective gene that caused hemophilia, a blood clotting disorder. A person gets this defective gene from both parents, and the most likely reason for this is if the parents are related. Queen Victoria's son and some of her descendants had minor injuries that led to their deaths because their blood wouldn't clot properly due to this defective gene. Elvis and his brother Jesse had a higher chance of having health problems and dying young because of how boys get their genes. Boys have one X chromosome from their mom and one Y chromosome from their dad, while girls have two X chromosomes. This means boys only have one copy of most genes on the X chromosome, while girls have two. If a boy gets a bad copy of a gene from his mom, he can't get a good copy from his dad like a girl can. Elvis got a bad gene from his mom, which might have affected him and his brother Jesse. Also, Elvis's grandparents on his mom's side, Bob and Doll, were closely related, and this could have passed on more health problems. This might have played a part in Jesse being stillborn and Elvis's mom, Gladys, dying young at 46. It's also why Gladys' sisters lived longer than their brothers. It seems like there might have been some problems with Elvis's family lines coming together. Either his great-grandparents' names are missing from the family tree, or both lines had bad genes that weren't replaced with healthy ones. Elvis's parents, Vernon and Gladys, only had one child, and they never knew why they couldn't have more. Gladys' nephew said she had a miscarriage. When Vernon's brother Vester married Gladys' sister Kletz, they also only had one child, a girl named Patsy. Elvis and Patsy were double first cousins and both were the only children in their families during the 1930s, which was unusual because big families were common for farm work. Because Elvis's parents had a hard time having children, it's possible that there were other lost pregnancies or that their family's DNA made it harder for them to have healthy babies. Elvis, his mom Gladys, and his dad Vernon formed a family of 3, and they took care of each other. They were a regular family trying to survive during tough times. They all loved each other and were scared of losing each other, especially after Elvis's difficult birth. Elvis was born weak and small, and it was a very close call for both him and his mom Gladys. After giving birth, Gladys felt different and had a lot of worries. She had twins, which means she was more likely to have problems after giving birth. Having twins makes it harder for a mom's body to balance its hormones because it needs to make extra hormones for 2 babies. Sometimes the body can't get back to normal right away. This can cause problems like being sad, not being able to sleep, feeling tired, and having trouble calming down. If these hormonal issues aren't fixed, they can last a long time. In 1935, when Elvis was born, things started to get better in Tupelo. President Roosevelt kept his promise to help the South. A hospital, a radio station, and an airport were built or being built there. Between 1936 and 1941, a lot of new buildings were made in the South, including schools, colleges, and other important places. This changed the way the area looked and helped improve people's lives. Elvis's mom, Gladys, had a tough life too. She lost her twin brother Jesse Garon when he was born, and then her grandmother and mother both passed away. Her mother, Doll, was very sick for a long time, and her daughters were struggling to take care of her. When Doll died, it was a bit of a relief for Gladys and her sisters. They lived in Tupelo, and Gladys was a strong person who took care of her family. The Smith family was wild and tough, and they had to work very hard every day to survive. They also needed a bit of luck, like when a big tornado hit Tupelo in 1936. When Elvis was born, it might have been a snowy Christmas because Tupelo usually doesn't get much snow. But in the winter of 1935 to 1936, there was a lot of snow, more than ever before. That winter had extreme temperatures, from very cold to very hot. In the middle of that, a very bad tornado hit Tupelo on April 5, 1936. It was the 4th worst tornado in the US history, destroying many homes and killing or hurting a lot of people. Elvis's mom, Gladys, held him tight when the tornado happened. Most of Elvis's family went to his grandparents' house to wait out the storm. They were lucky because they survived the tornado with only a few scratches and not much damage to their things. After a big event that made people all over the country pay attention, Tupelo went back to being a small town with not much happening. Annie Presley, Elvis's mom, said there wasn't much to do in East Tupelo, where Elvis lived. There were no traffic lights or busy roads to watch. East Tupelo and Tupelo were two different places, and East Tupelo was seen as the poorer side, divided by a highway. In East Tupelo, Elvis's parents worked hard to make ends meet, take care of their child, and go to church. They were a close-knit family of 3, and even though they seemed to stay in their own small world, it was because they were a small family compared to others. Elvis's mom, Gladys, called him baby, and he later called her the same name. They trusted each other a lot, along with Vernon, Elvis's dad. They were part of a church community and were close with Gladys' Uncle Gaines Mansell, who was a preacher there. They were a loving and tight-knit family. Elvis's family, which included his parents Vernon and Gladys, lived in a small house that Vernon built. They shared everything, even a bed, because they were very poor. In the 1930s, many families in Tupelo lived like this. They had to move a lot, and Elvis lived in many different homes before he was 13. The only thing that stayed the same for them was their love for each other and the support of their community. Vernon, Elvis's dad, was sometimes seen as lazy, but he never left his family. Many men did that, leaving their wives and kids to struggle. Vernon stayed and worked hard to provide for his family. He wanted to be the kind of father Elvis needed and the kind of husband that allowed Gladys to worry less. But for Vernon, Elvis's dad, things didn't go as planned. He made a mistake and had back problems, which were hard to forget. It's not clear how much he wished things were different, but he stayed in tough situations, and that was more than many men in his family had done before. When Vernon was in prison in 1938, being away from his family was very hard. Vernon, Elvis's dad, once got into trouble with the law. A long time before he talked to Elvis about staying out of trouble, Vernon and his brother-in-law Travis sold a pig to a man named Orville Bean. Orville also had a loan on Vernon's house. They made a bad decision and tried to forge a check. Vernon was arrested and couldn't afford to get out of jail, so he stayed there for more than 6 months. His wife Gladys and their little boy Elvis, who was 3 at the time, had to manage on their own. Vernon's uncle Noah tried to help by asking Orville not to send Vernon to prison, but Orville said Vernon needed to learn a lesson. In the end, Vernon was sent to a prison in Mississippi for 3 years. During tough times, Elvis's mom and him needed help from others to survive. People from their community, the church, and family members supported them. When Elvis's dad, Vernon, was arrested and they had to leave their home, they stayed with family. Vernon's father, Jesse, didn't help much, but Uncle Noah did. Noah was a reliable and strong figure in the family. He took care of his family when he was young and later became the mayor of East Tupelo. He helped build the water and sewage system in the town. Noah was always there for his family and community. Noah, Elvis's grandpa, owned a small store where he would sometimes give people food without them paying right away. He was a kind man who always wanted to help others. He was known as Pa Presley and was remembered fondly by Elvis's family and people from their town, Tupelo. Noah also had an old school bus that he used to drive kids to school, women to work, and people to church. Every year, he took kids to the Memphis Zoo. After a big tornado, he used the bus to help with cleanup efforts, taking men, including the Presley boys, to remove fallen trees and dig graves. Gladys, Elvis's mom, had to ride a bus to visit Vernon, Elvis's dad, who was in prison. Cousin Lee Clark remembered that an old school bus took them there. Noah, Elvis's grandfather, would also give food to Gladys and Elvis from his grocery store. They got things like flour, sugar, and tea. The Smith family, Elvis's mom's side, would give them things like milk, butter, eggs, fruits, and vegetables. People felt bad for Gladys and Elvis when Vernon was in prison, and Noah tried to help them as much as he could. In Elvis's early life, his mom Gladys had a hard time but got help from others. They all lived through tough times like the Depression, and people in their community shared what they had. They helped each other because they all needed it to survive. A man named Guy Harris remembered how close everyone was and how they helped families who didn't have enough food or a place to sleep. They took care of each other because they were all poor. People say that how rich or poor a child was during this time can be seen in the number of photos they have. Elvis didn't have any baby photos. His first photo was taken when he was 2 years old. People shared things like cameras, sewing machines, and tools back then. If someone had something, they let others use it. Elvis's family didn't have much, but they still cared for each other. Noah Presley, Elvis's great uncle, had a big impact on him. Noah and Elvis's mom believed in sharing what they had with others if they needed it. Elvis received help from Noah many times, and it wasn't just about getting food when his parents couldn't afford it. Noah would also give Elvis little treats like candy bars and Coca-Cola, which Elvis probably remembered. In October 1938, Vernon's wife Gladys wrote letters asking for him to be let out of prison early because she was sick and needed his help. She had no family to rely on and had a young son, Elvis. Even the person who put Vernon in prison, Mr. Bean, agreed. Vernon was released on February 6, 1939, after serving just a bit over 8 months of his 3-year sentence. He had been away for more than a year, including time before the trial. Gladys got him out because of a hardship case so he could support them. People seemed to forget about his time in prison, and it didn't affect Vernon's life much. Elvis never talked about it, and most people didn't know until much later. Gladys, Elvis's mom, changed after her husband went to prison. She was already dealing with a lot of hardships, like losing her parents, a son, a sister, and a cousin's baby between 1931 and 1941. She also felt alone when her husband was in jail. She was nervous, but she was also very strong, committed, and determined to keep going. Her sister Retha died in a sad way, and then Annie, another sister, had a baby who passed away soon after being born. Gladys helped Annie through this difficult time, telling her to believe in God and that God would help her get through it. Gladys had used this advice herself many times. Elvis, his mom Gladys, and Dad Vernon moved a lot, sometimes staying with relatives or renting small homes. They had a hard time paying bills and even lost their car once. They didn't have much money, just enough to get by or hope for the best. Vernon worked very hard, getting up early and walking to his job. Gladys' sister Cletz and her husband Vester also struggled. They had 2 young boys, Johnny and Travis, living with them. Cletz was pregnant and had the same complications Gladys did. They didn't have enough money for a doctor or hospital bill when the baby was due. Luckily, Elvis's Aunt Delta Mae Presley sent them money in time to help. When Elvis began school in East Tupelo in 1941, his parents, Vernon and Gladys, really wanted him to learn a lot. They didn't have much education themselves, so they knew how important it was for Elvis to finish school. On his first day of first grade at East Tupelo Consolidated School, they decided that he would complete high school. They believed that education was the key to a better life for him. When Elvis was a child in East Tupelo, people who knew him said he was just a normal boy. He wasn't very memorable to many and was actually described as a good boy. His friend and cousin, Bobby Roberts, remembered that Elvis had a great sense of humor and was respectful. He listened to his mother and followed her rules. Elvis was close to his mom, but their relationship wasn't unusual or extreme. He was a happy, normal kid who liked to play ball, wrestle, and climb trees like other children. His mom allowed him to have fun and be free, but he still knew to respect her and others. Elvis, like other kids in Tupelo, had to do chores such as fetching water from the well and running errands for his mom. He dreamed of providing for his mother when he grew up. His great-aunt Christine remembered him saying he would buy her a big house, lots of food, and pretty things. Elvis was just a kid with dreams, but his and his family's struggles in Tupelo made those dreams real. The small acts of kindness from his Uncle Noah, like giving him Coca-Colas, candy bars, and free groceries, also taught him to give back to others. Elvis Presley's mom, Gladys, was very protective of him, just like other moms were of their kids. When Elvis was about 10 years old, his friends, including Guy Harris, were allowed to walk to the movies by themselves, which was about a mile away. Gladys and other moms wanted to make sure their kids behaved and didn't cause trouble. She was clear about what she wanted them to do, and she didn't accept any excuses. People who knew Elvis when he was young say that his mom, Gladys, didn't walk him to school every day like some people think. Olita Grimes, his teacher and neighbor, remembers walking with the kids to school, including Elvis, but she doesn't remember Gladys doing it. Another classmate, Becky Martin, also remembers waiting for everyone to gather and crossing the street with them, but she never saw Gladys cross the street with Elvis. Azalea Smith Moore, who was also there at the time, said that crossing the street was dangerous because of big trucks, so kids usually crossed with an adult. Sometimes, Gladys was that adult, but she didn't always walk with Elvis to school. When Elvis lived in Tupelo, there was always food to eat, even if it wasn't always what you wanted. People in the neighborhood had gardens and chickens so they could grow and raise their own food. This was like having a farm in the city. In Tupelo, women would preserve and can food to have it for later. But when they moved to Memphis, there was less space for gardens, so they couldn't preserve food as much. Meat was hard to find, and they didn't eat out often. People just ate what they could find for meals. Even though the food might not have been fancy, everyone made sure no one went to bed hungry or woke up hungry. They had limited food, but they used what they had creatively. In the country, people used bags from flour and feed to make clothes and other things like sheets because they didn't have much money. Women got very creative with these bags during hard times. Elvis's mom, Azalea, said they used these sacks to make sheets for their beds. They also made dresses, pants, hair bows, and curtains from these bags. Many people, including Elvis, wore clothes made from flour sacks during the Great Depression. It was just a part of their life because times were tough. In Elvis's family, respect was very important. He wasn't a spoiled child who got everything he wanted. His parents expected him to be well-behaved and act with integrity. His classmate, Magdalene Morgan, said Elvis was very respectful to his parents and was a well-mannered boy. He was raised with a lot of respect, and he wasn't allowed to talk back or be rude.